And we are now back. This is Doc Williams, and this is a brief history of American weightlifting. And we have the pleasure to be with who today?
My name is Leo Totten, and I'm president and head coach of East Coast Gold weightlifting team and president and owner of Totten Training Systems.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the time, Leo.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yes. So could you tell me a little bit about your background in weightlifting?
How far back should I go? Because I've been around for an awful long time. I first bought my first set of weights way back when I was 12 years old. Happened to get them at York Barbell because I only live less than an hour away. So I bought my first set of weights there and saw a lot of the Olympic lifters that were training there back in the day. There was like Bob Bednarski and Fred Lau and Tony Garcia, all these guys, and that's really what got me motivated. And from there, I started off 8th grade. I weighed 83 pounds. I was just a wee little guy, and weightlifting was really good to me, and I got hooked by everything. And throughout even my high school career, when I was doing gymnastics and wrestling and soccer, I was playing a little bit of everything, but always was pretty much a full-time weightlifter as well. So that's how things got started, and just kind of evolved from there.
Now, could you talk about a little bit of your career of weightlifting when you got older as well?
Well, again, it was one of those things. It was kind of a long career. Progress was always slow and steady, and for the most part, didn't have a coach until later years. I just pretty much coached myself, and that's one of the reasons why I think I like coaching so much now. Is that back in the day when I was pretty much coaching myself, things that would take me sometimes months, sometimes years, by trial and error to figure out what I was doing right or wrong. Now I can look at somebody in just a few seconds and correct anything that they're doing wrong. So that's pretty much how I got my degree in physical education, and so I was teaching physical education for 33 years and coaching all along the way. So it just kind of evolved from there and got to the point where I made a few national teams and traveled a little bit, and so as a competitor, made it to two Olympic trials, and 8 or 9 nationals. So my career was okay as a 90-kilo lifter at the time. My best lifts were 150 snatch and 192 clean and jerk, but back in those days, there was an awful lot of very good 90-kilo guys too. So it was very competitive, and so I retired after the '84 Olympic trials and went full-time into coaching, and it's been working out pretty well ever since.
Now, could you expound upon how you started coaching or forming a team in that aspect?
Well, what happened was that like I said, I pretty much coached myself, and what I found when I started really getting into coaching weightlifting pretty much full-time. Now, when I say full-time, I don't mean as in a professional job. I did that full-time on the side because my coaching and teaching career had to, that was how I made my living. But as full-time as far as really focusing on coaching weightlifting and not lifting myself. So it just kind of evolved from there. And what I found was that I myself was out there training by myself and teaching myself and coaching myself. And I did have some help once I got hooked up with York Barbell, and Dick Smitty Smith became my coach. But that wasn't until my later years. So because I was out there by myself, what I found was that there was a lot of other folks out there that are just kind of on their own and didn't really have a team affiliation or didn't have somebody close by where they could train all the time. And so I said, well, in '92, actually, I started my team because I had a guy that I was training him, and he qualified for nationals, and neither he nor I could afford to go to the nationals. So I said, well, tell you what, I'm going to start a team. We're going to work on just gathering anybody who needs help, and we'll try to get sponsors for them and help them out that way. And so that's when our team started in '92. And we started off with 2 or 3 lifters, and our first American Open was, I think, in '92, maybe '93. And we had like 4 lifters. Well, now in the last American Open, we had 35 lifters competing. So, like I said, it's really evolved.
Oh my goodness. Now, where was your base for the team? Was it in Maryland? Where did it come out
Well,
of?
well, and that's really what's kind of unique in our situation because I had a couple different places where I would train folks, but it wasn't really. It was only a couple times a week. It wasn't really, people would travel there. It wasn't like a full time thing. So what I did was I developed a concept, sort of like almost like a farm system for baseball, where we have satellite centers, and the idea is that instead of having the athletes come to me, we would set up satellite centers where they would have facilities and equipment and coach and develop coaches there and have those coaches try to bring in more athletes. So it became a system of not only training athletes but training coaches to train more athletes. So my philosophy was that if one coach can develop 10 lifters, well, if you develop 10 coaches who each develop 10 lifters, and all of a sudden you're up to 100. So it's like an exponential thing, and we've grown a lot because of that, and the quality of our coaches have improved, and the quality of the lifting has improved. So to answer your question, there's not one set place. Now we do have, right now we probably have about 13 satellite centers that are really very active. Then we have another 5 or 6 that are we just pretty much call it affiliates, where we know there's a facility there. So if somebody is in search of a place to train, that they do have the facility and the equipment, because that's sometimes part of the big problem. And of course, now with all the CrossFits around, everybody has some stuff anyway. Back in my day, oh my gosh, I don't know how many times I trained in my basement with virtually no equipment or unheated garages, and it was the facilities now are so much better. But again, I think that's a big part of it, is if you provide the facilities and the good coaching, then not only are you helping your team, but you're helping each individual and helping the sport of weightlifting altogether.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned talking about having those facilities, setting those up. Before you started that, did you was there any kind of feeding system like that in the United States that you know of?
No, not that I was aware of. Everything was centered into like one particular facility. And really, from an ideal situation, that is best. Mm-hmm. I mean, like for instance, Jim Schmitz at Sports Palace. I mean, what a great facility, and it was just hardcore lifting, and he brought in, and he made Olympic champions, he made world competitors, but everything was centered right there. Then you had like Wesley Weightlifters, and some of these different places that are just phenomenal. And it's great to have one location, but we said, well, we can't do that. We don't have the facilities or the time and the inclination to do that. So because there's so many people out there kind of on their own, we'll set up this satellite system. And I said, well, heck, a farm system works for baseball. Let's make it like this. So it's really worked. It's worked out well for us, and that's not for everybody. And it takes a lot of organizational skills, I can tell you. I do a lot of juggling, that's for sure. But like even when we go to the American Open or Nationals, if we have, like at the last American Open, we had 35 athletes competing. Well, we also had 10 coaches there working with them. So out of those 35 lifters, I coached personally probably 6 or 7 of them, but then the other 20 couple, that was by our other coaches. So, it really is a team effort.
That's excellent. Now, when you look at that and see the progression over time, could you just talk about what it takes to build a team of coaches, how you actually go about that?
Well, one of the things we do is, we go to the different areas where there seems to be some lifters developing, and then we go there and we do coaching courses for them. We do seminars for them, because not everybody can be a good coach. Just because you're a good lifter doesn't necessarily make you a good coach of lifters. So we look for teachers, we look for coaches that are in schools and universities, and so we kind of scope out whatever area seems to be in need, and then we develop the coaches from there. And a lot of times, what I'll find is that I've probably taught more of the club coach, it's called level 1 now, or whatever the new name is. I probably have taught as many of those as anybody in the country. I've been doing it for like 25 years. So what happens is you go to these different areas and coaches kind of latch on. They say, hey, this stuff is pretty cool. How can I set up something in my area? So that's why then we just kind of use that and say, okay, here's what we can do to help you. And we say, if you want to be a satellite center for our team, that's fine. If you want to start your own team, we'll help you do that. So it's not we're not just trying to grab up everybody, and that's why our team got big. But people just kind of gravitate toward us, so to speak. And so we just we're interested in building the sport of weightlifting. So, and I've had guys who have been part of our team that as a satellite center, and then like Regis Becker, for instance, a real good friend of mine. He started off in Pittsburgh with a satellite center for East Coast Gold, and was for about 5 or 6 years. And then the people who own the gym, they said, we'd really like to be our own entity. We'd like to be our own club. So he asked if it would be okay if he would like break away and do his own club. And I said, absolutely. As long as we can still stay friends, that's all I care. So, and we have been. And he's got his own club going, and they're doing really well, and we support them, and we go to their meets. They come to our meets. So it's, again, it's just trying to build the sport.
Excellent. Now, speaking about that, you've seen a lot. You've been involved in USA weightlifting for a while. Could you speak about 25 plus years ago from that perspective and how it's changed over in the last few decades?
Oh, it's changed in a lot of ways. It's become a lot more professional. We've got a bunch more lifters now. I think like 4 years ago, the American Open had like 300 lifters, and this past one had over 900 lifters. So we've got the numbers now, okay? And I think overall the quality is getting better. I think the coaching is getting better. Although I must say, I think there is the internet, I think, has certainly helped a lot. But in another sense, it's actually kind of hurt things a little bit, I think, too, because there's such a plethora of information out there. Some of it's really good, knowledgeable information, but there's a lot of crap out there. So anytime I do a course, I always tell people, I say, look, you're not going to be an expert by the time you leave this course. I said, this is your next step in learning. I said, here, I'm an old fart, and I'm still learning, okay? So I said, if you walk out of a course thinking that you know it all or you're an expert, there's just no way. And I said, if nothing else, when you take this course, that it'll give you a better filter system. And by that, what I mean is when you go on the internet, which everybody does, when you go on the internet, you'll have a better filter system to filter out the good stuff from the not so good stuff. And because there is a lot of good stuff out there, but I say, look, is what you see, is it research backed? Is it proven by time and time again? Trial and error. Are you hearing it from a coach who's actually produced lifters, or are you hearing it from somebody who thinks maybe this would be the way to go? And people say, well, Leo, you're just old school, that you don't want anything new. And I said, well, I disagree. I said, yeah, I am old school, but I think we're right school because it has worked, and physics doesn't change. Your center of gravity is what it is. The laws of biomechanics, that doesn't change. Now, it might change a little bit with the leverages, different body types, things like that. But overall, everybody needs to be in the same ballpark.
Now, when you look at information, how do you craft your approach to lifting? Has it been through just experience? Is it different coaches? Or is it, like you said, different papers looking at the science behind it? What guides you?
All of the above. Okay. First of all, constantly reading. My wife thinks I'm a little crazy. We were on the beach. Oh, it's been 10 years ago, and she's reading, I forget, some novel or something, and I'm reading Tudor Bompa's Theory and Methodology of Training, and she was making fun of me. She said, "Why don't you read something enjoyable?" I said, "Well, this is enjoyable to me." So constantly reading. I've been very fortunate to have some excellent mentors throughout my career of lifting and coaching background, not only for weightlifting, but in other sports as well. I felt like I had a great education with my BS and MS in education and physical education. So, I've had a lot of really good mentors and helpers along the way. And the athletes, what we do, we're constantly evolving, constantly changing, but what we do works. And if it stops working, and you got to keep moving forward. Because if you're not improving, you're actually getting worse. So that's been the motto, and we work not only the physical part, but we work the mental part and contest preparation, nutrition. We try to cover all the bases.
Now, looking towards the past, and then we'll go towards the future. What are some standout athletes in we'll say 70s, 80s in U.S. Lifting that really stand out in your mind, and why?
I would say probably one of my heroes for U.S. lifting anyway, and I was fortunate enough to train with him some, and was Lee James, silver medalist in the '76 Olympics. And the thing about him is, number one, his work ethic was just awesome, and I think probably more than anything though was the mental aspect. I mean, he was really positive and just very much under control, and just he succeeded because of not only the physical but the mental and the emotional and how you handle it. And the pressure at the '76 Olympics was just unbelievable. He missed his opening clean and jerk, and he had to go up 7 kilos just to get in the middle range. And you don't go 7.5 kilos at the time. It was 7.5 kilos. You don't jump that much after a miss. And me being Mr. Conservative, I'm always like, well, you missed that first attempt. You got to take that same weight. We're not bumping it up. He had to go up, and he made it. So to me, that was such a mental thing. And just watching him, and fortunate to watch some of the other international guys that came around, like David Riegert and Vardanyan, and those guys. They're just so mentally tough that's what really sticks in my mind is the guys that aren't only I mean, you can be really, really, really strong, but if you don't have the technique to go with it, if you don't have the mental aspect, that you got to be the well-rounded guy.
Speaking on that briefly, do you think different athletes can start developing to elevate their mental edge before competitions? Do you think there's certain exercises mentally they had to go through, or do you think it's sometimes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I'll use myself as an example. Back when I was competing, I went through a phase where I was doing really well. I was up ranked fairly high, but I just went through this plateau where my lifts weren't moving much at all, and I hadn't done any mental training at all. And what I was doing, I was trying harder and harder and harder, and the harder I tried, the worse I did. Kind of like my golf game, actually, but that's another story altogether. But what I found was that I just kind of leveled off, and the more my lifting stopped improving, the longer that happened, then the more that it bugged me. And so, like I said, I would try harder and harder. I would sit in the corner and have a towel over my head, and I'd be psyching myself up. And heck, 3 weeks before a national meet, I'd be driving down the road, and I'd be starting to get put lifts in my head. Well, I'm gonna start with this lift, and oh wait a minute, and then what if I miss this? And then so everything started getting negative. So I found a guy who was at Mount St. Mary's College, right up the street, and I saw an article in the paper. He was actually worked with the police department, and he worked with athletes there. And he said, and the article was about his mental training that he did with these guys, and hypnotism and self auto suggestion, things like that. So I went and visited him, and he put me through some different hypnosis type things and visualization. So he taught me that. I started applying that stuff to my own lifting, and all of a sudden I could relax more in the meets, and my lifts started moving again. So I've been a big proponent of the mental part ever since that, because I know it's really worked for me. And anytime I work with athletes, we do some of that when we run.
Second.
Hello,
Yes, Leo, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Can you? Is my screen back?
Your screen's back. I think you moved around, and that's what did you in.
Yeah. Wait 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Yeah. My boss comes in right when I'm doing this, and 20 people come in for a staff meeting, and that's why I'm trying to continue the conversation, nodding as I'm switching rooms. So I apologize about that.
That's okay.
I'm,
That
I'm back.
how much of that last conversation did you
I,
get?
I got most of everything you were talking about going through with your athletes with the regimens, and
Yeah.
you stop right there. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, basically, what I was saying was that it worked for me, and I have athletes going through it, and we have a weightlifting camp that we do. This will be our 32nd year of running the camp, actually. So we spend a good bit of time at that camp teaching the athletes these different drills, visualization and relaxation, and that sort of thing. And I've even made up my own mental training CD.
Wow. Wow.
So. So, like I said, I believe very strongly in the mental part, and I think that's where in the United States we need to do way more of that. I don't know if anybody else who really does the mental training like that.
That's interesting. Now, when do these camps take place?
Every summer, we have the next one is scheduled for June 13th to the 18th,
Okay.
and this will be the third year that we do it, doing it at the Lake Placid Olympic Training Center.
Wow.
So it's got great facilities. The food is good. We bring our medical guy along, Mike Walters, who's just the best, and he comes along. He's got Olympic Training Center credentials, and so they let him use their facilities. And and that's another thing we stress is the recuperation methods and the recovery methods. So we beat them up, man. We do. Something like 13 workouts in a 6-day period.
Wow.
And it's heavy duty, but we do the recovery stuff. We talk about nutrition, and it's a good deal.
That's excellent. Now, speaking about that and just helping different athletes in America, the lifters to up their game basically as they're training. What do you see the main difference as the sport has evolved or the lifting in America? What do you think will be necessary for athletes in America to also do well on the international stage as well in the future?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that enter into that because people always ask me, they say, well, United States lifters are doing really well, but when they go international, they're not winning medals, and well, we are winning more medals, but it's the Olympic gold that really counts, of course. But there's a lot of factors to that, and people always the first thing they say is it's got to be the drugs. That's a factor, okay? I mean, let's be honest. But I think if you use that as a crutch and say that's the only reason, and if it wasn't for the drugs, we'd be right up there. I think there's a lot of different factors. I think the fact that we're getting the numbers now, but we don't have the numbers that say China has. Okay, so I think quantity has a lot to do with it, and we're getting more of that, obviously. Our coaching is getting better. Our lifters are keeping a closer eye on their nutrition. We have to train and compete drug-free. So we need to have as much of a knowledge background as possible for the athletes so that they know that they're not going to be able to train 10 or 12 times a week unless they do the recovery stuff legally and correctly. So a lot of it, I think, is the education, but the facilities are better now. The coaching is better. So, I think things are moving forward. I really do.
So, could you speak on the numbers for a little bit? You mentioned having the number. China, why do they have such a large amount of lifters? How is that possible?
Well, I think part of it is that they have a lot of people, first of all. But sport is very important to their country, and they're subsidized, and they have, and I can't speak a whole lot for the Chinese, but I just do know that they continually, produce a lot of lifters, and it's almost like it's like clockwork. When one is down, the next one steps in, and I think they have a good coaching scheme. They have a good national scheme, and I think that's one of the things that would really help the United States. Right now, we don't really have a national plan. Okay, we have pockets of, and you'll find this out in all these interviews that you do. We have pockets of teams. We have pockets of coaching philosophies. but I don't think we really have one national plan, and all the countries that are beating us, they do. Now, I think we're starting to work toward that, but it's tough, though, because everybody thinks their method is best, and they produce this, and they produce that, and I understand that, but we all need to be moving in one direction, and I think right now there's different directions that people are going, so we have pockets that I think if everybody would be pulling in the same direction would really help.
Now that's an interesting point. When you mentioned having a national plan, how would that, or theorizing that, Leo, how would that work, you think?
I don't know. That's the thing, because in this country, everybody has kind of started on their own, and they've evolved. And like, I can speak for my own team, we've evolved through our circumstances and our situation, and others have done the same thing. So to get everybody on the same page, that's tough. I don't know how that's to be done, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Now, looking forward, as you mentioned, the numbers have increased drastically in the last couple of years. Do you see the direct correlation with the CrossFit boxes and having that? What do you see the couple factors why there's such an explosion?
Well, I think CrossFit is the number one reason. And people always tell me, they say, well, Leo, you're a purist. You're just a weightlifting guy. You don't like CrossFit. I love CrossFit. And I tell people that. Matter of fact, most of my workouts take place at a CrossFit gym right down the road from my house. But I think the CrossFit kind of gets a bad name because some of them handle themselves without a whole lot of knowledge and background, okay? And they just kind of follow the WOD, what's the workout of the day. And people are kind of thrown in there without really having the background. And this, I always joke about it. I said the doctors and the physical therapists and all, they'll set up their practices right next door because they know they're going to get a lot of business. But I think more and more the CrossFits are serious about doing things correctly. And like, as an example, the place where I train, I think they do it right, where they have a CrossFit section of their building, but they also have a large strength and conditioning and strength and power section where there's like 10 platforms and benches and power racks and squat racks. And they teach the snatch, they teach the clean and jerk, they teach it correctly. And so I think more and more the CrossFits are starting to do that. And this is why more and more of the CrossFit athletes are making it to our national meets. What I see, though, is that I want to see that go the next level, where you have a lot of the, out of those 900 athletes, there's a large section of them that are in the E, F, G, H, and J sections, and not as many that we want to see up in the A and the B divisions. Okay, so the quantity is there, but I'd like to see more of that quantity turning into more quality and get more lifters at the top level. There's been a few, but this is where the good coaching and a lot of the CrossFits are really taking advantage of USA Weightlifting and getting me and other coaches in there to try to teach them correctly. And so the more education, the better. And I think if nothing else, too, even though the CrossFitters that are participating now, they might be a little bit older and may not actually get to the level. I mean, really good lifters, you got to start young, and you have to develop those patterns. And it takes a while to get really to the elite level. But to get to that level, I think if nothing else, now people, those kids that are doing the CrossFit now, when they have their kids will know what a snatch and clean and jerk is. Whereas now the 25, 28-year-olds are just learning what a snatch and clean and jerk is. But if they're teaching and their kids are finding out about this, that's where the base really will blossom, I think.
Excellent, yeah. So that actually ties right into the next one. We'll look at the next cycle. We're about to go to the 2016 Rio Games. Where do you see weightlifting progressing in the next, we'll say one or two Olympics? And then you just answered the far-reaching range, but what do you see on the horizon?
Well, I'm always a positive guy. I'm thinking we're moving forward, and I think we still need to work more with our youth and our juniors because they're the ones, and we got to be having a 4 and an 8-year plan. I mean, not just a 4-year plan, but an 8-year plan as well. How can we keep these kids motivated and interested? And we're talking about long-term athletic development. I think sometimes kids are kind of pushed too early, too young, and then they burn out. And the whole idea is you set the base and make sure they get their 10,000 hours of training in, and but not just weightlifting, but all around athletic ability. And if you're 8, 9, 10 years old, then you should be doing some other sports and developing your technique. So then when they do come to specialize a little bit later on, they're not burnt out. Their technique is already ingrained. You're not teaching them something new. So I think if we just need to sit down and say, okay, what is our goal for 2020? What's our goal for 2024? And lay out a plan for that. And we're in the process of doing that.
Now, do you see USAW? And I'm a novice. I have no idea. For USAW, do they try to integrate with different schools, even at the elementary or middle school level, to try to initiate, like you were talking about, those techniques, those patterning younger? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And that boils down to educating our coaches as to, if you're working with an elementary or a middle school kid, they're a kid, okay? They're not an adult. You can't handle them the same way as you would an adult. And this is one of the things that our coaches are becoming more educated on that. And USAW is pushing that, again, the LTAD, the long-term athletic development, because we have guys that are 20, 21, 22 years old, and they say, well, I want to train like I see what the Bulgarians are doing, I see what the Chinese are doing, I want to train like them. And I'm like, it's a process. It takes time, and you got to set the foundation. You got to get those 10,000 hours of training in, and I'll say, well, and so that could take 10 years, but you have to start young and have long-term goals. And instead of saying, well, I've got this really strong 10-year-old kid, I'm going to get really push him and really get him competing. That's all well and good, but what's the long-term plan for that kid? And is he going to be hurt in the process? And has his technique really developed? So, and people that want to train like the Bulgarians and Chinese, and I'll say, well, how long have you been training? Oh, 6 months. You haven't exactly put in your 10,000 hours of training. So they have to understand that it's a process, and it's a step-by-step thing. Yeah. And and the coaches that USAW are promoting are trying to get that point across.
Excellent. Leo, thank you for the time. Before you go, could you answer one or two questions?
Sure.
This one was, you've been teaching a long time. You've been seeing a lot of different athlete coaches. What is the one concept or teaching that you try to inculcate in a student?
One thing?
One or two.
You mean for the athlete?
For the athlete, let's go with that. Athlete and then coach.
Okay. The number one thing with the athlete has to be technique. I mean, technique. I mean, because back in the day when I was lifting, I was known as a technician, and I was quick and I was flexible. I had those things going for me. I just wasn't strong. Okay, which sounds kind of weird for a weightlifter right now. So I knew I had to get stronger, but the technique was there. Once somebody develops bad technique, man, it's really hard to change it. So this is why right off the bat, you try to teach good, proper technique with light weights. Especially guys they're tough to teach because the ego gets in the way and they want to lift more and more and more, and that's understandable. But what they have to do is, if they understand if the technique is good in the long run, then it'll pay off with bigger lifts. And as far as the coaches, we try to coach the coaches the same way, and we try to say, I do anyway. I try to say, look, when you're working with your athletes, there's three factors that you got to consider. Okay, obviously the technique. You want the technique as good as possible that you're teaching, but you also have to make sure that they're flexible and mobile enough to get into those correct positions, but they also have to be strong enough to be able to hold those positions. So it's technique, flexibility, and strength. And to me, you find out what's the weak area for your as a coach. You find out what the weak area is for your athletes, and that's what you work on. And if the coaches can get that idea, then you've pretty much got all the bases covered, I think.
Excellent.
And from a coaching standpoint, keep learning. Keep learning, keep watching, keep observing, keep evolving. That's how you succeed.
Speaking of that, could you share like a light bulb moment? You might have been teaching for a long period of time, and you just saw something. And you're like, "Oh my God, it all makes sense now." Is there a certain time that you can remember back on?
Not really. It's always a slow process, and it's kind of like, oh, is that what you mean? But I can't think of anything right off the top of the head that you just because, like I said, if you're constantly learning, those things just kind of get into your philosophy, and you gotta if you treat athletes with respect and dignity, and if you always do what's best for the athlete, you can't go wrong. And that's where you just have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, am I doing what I think is best for the athlete? And that's really how our team developed. The main philosophy that we have is whatever's best for the athlete. Then the team thing is secondary. The team will come along, even when it comes to making selections on their weight classes. Like for instance, I had a situation one time where we had 6 girls in the 63 kilo class at nationals. Well, team wise, you can only put in 2 per weight class to score points. So I sat all the girls down. I said, look, here's where your ranking is as far as the team. Here's where your ranking is as far as the competition. Said if you want to go up to the 69 kilo class, you can, because we didn't have any 69s at the time. And I said, you can do that. It would help the team. But I said, whatever's best for you. All 6 of them decided to stay at 63s, and I was absolutely fine with that. So the point is that whatever's best for the individual athlete, the team thing will come along, and that's secondary. I'm competitive though. I want to win. Don't get me wrong, but it still boils down to if you do what's best for the athlete, it'll balance out.
Excellent. Leo, thank you very much for the time. Could you, where can the people find you at online?
My email address, Leo Totten, all one word, at Comcast.net. Or you can go at Totten Training at Comcast.net, because my business, we do seminars and my own certifications as well as USAW certifications. Check our website, www.eastcoastgold.org or www.tottentraining.com. Always around to try to help people, and I don't care what team you're on. If you have any questions or need any help with anything, that's what we're here for. And the reason I like doing that is because there have been a lot of people along the way that have helped me, and it's one of the reasons why I like coaching, just giving back, because the sport's been really good to me, and I just like to give back.
Excellent. Leo, thank you for the time, and we look forward to seeing you at a meet soon, all right?
Thank you very much, Doc. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.